On tonight's program, I interview Marshall Klarfeld. Marshall Klarfeld graduated with an engineering degree from CALTECH in 1951 after studying under such luminaries as Nobel Laureate professors Richard Feynman and Linus. Fascinated by what he considered advanced scientific knowledge in the Bible story of creation, Klarfeld embarked on a quest to unravel the mysteries surrounding humanity's early history. He's the author of Adam, the Missing Link, Gilgamesh 10, The Anunnaki Were Here, and his newest book, Mysteries of Alien Technology. To learn more about Marshall Klarfeld, visit adamthemissinglink.com. Marshall Klarfeld, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Russell. Glad to be with you.
Well, I got to ask it. How old are you?
May the 10th of this year, I'll be 88 years old.
Third oldest guest on the program. The oldest is Jacques Fresco, been on the show twice. He's still around. He's 101 years old. Wayne Green, he's passed on now, 91 years old. And Marshall Klarfeld, 87, going on 88. Still writing books and still coming up with new theories regarding the Anunnaki. Remember, Marshall Klarfeld was a student and friend of Zecharia Sitchin. So with that said, you've decided to come out with a whole new theory regarding the true God of the Hebrews.
Yes. I think that in the research that Zecharia Sitchin did, and I had a 10-year relationship with him, and we discussed many things on the phone and through correspondence, the subject came up of who was the God of the Hebrews, and I put forward the suggestion that I thought it was Enlil, who was the commander of the Anunnaki, and Sitchin agreed. He said he thought that was right on. Now, to prove that is another matter, but if you make that assumption, it opens up a whole Pandora's box of the history of the Hebrews.
Did Sitchin ever write about this, or did this only come up in private conversations?
We had it in private conversations. He may have mentioned it in some of his notes. He wrote a lot of stuff outside of the books that were published on his website. I've not researched that recently to see if it's there, but I remember distinctly that it appeared to us that this angry Hebrew god had a lot of the same characteristics as Enlil, who was the commander of the Anunnaki. And if you make that assumption and you go trace the history of the animosity between Enki, who was a half-brother of the commander, and particularly Enki's son Marduk. Marduk was a very ambitious bad seed of Enki who wanted to be commander, and the only way he could do that was to undo Enlil. And there's much in Sitchin's writings about this animosity and how it manifested itself. And I've done some research recently which leads me to believe that the thing that has been the longest hatred in the history of humans against each other is this anti-Semitism. And I've traced it to Babylon, when Marduk became supreme. If you recall in the history that Sitchin revealed to us, there was an atomic war between the gods, and Marduk's side was defeated by the Enlilite sons, and it caused, it was in the Sinai desert, and it caused what they called the evil wind. And the evil wind was a dust cloud of atomic particles that drifted from the Sinai desert to the east and eventually reached Sumar and wiped it out. It was actually one of the reasons that the Sumerian civilization disappears so quickly. This is atomic fallout did it in. And at that point, since it missed Babylon, this is kind of interesting. The two brothers, Enki And Enlil, as revealed to us in the Lost Book of Enki by Sitchin, decided that it was time that Marduk received supremacy of the earth, and he was given that in Babylon because apparently the evil one bypassed him, and he got this supremacy, and that was around the year 2024 BC, according to Sitchin. So if you trace back the history of what went on in Babylon from that point forward, one of the kings that Marduk appointed was a guy named Hammurabi. It was around 1754 BC, and he produced a code of rules, over 282 laws of what people should obey and what the penalties would be for each of these crimes, or misdemeanors, or whatever they were. It was quite extensive, and I've read it out. And I went to the Quran, and I found almost identical penalties in the Quran for the similar malfeasances. And I said to myself, well, gee, how did that tie together? And it dawned on me that it was possible that if, this is really speculation on my part, Russell, I want you and your audience to understand that I'm just letting my mind go in the direction of, if Enlil was the god of the Hebrews, could Marduk have been the god of the Islamics? In other words, the Quran, which appeared in around 600, was a book of laws that came from somewhere and were given to their prophet Muhammad, as was the rules and the history of the Hebrews was given by their God in the form of the Torah. In other words, the whole history of Judaism is encased in the book given to Moses, the 5 books of the Torah given to Moses by their God. Now, do you see the connection? Okay. Now, I'm not saying that this is what really happened, but to me, it's a curious situation that from that time forward, there's been this animosity by the Islamic religion against Judaism, and if Marduk felt that his mortal enemy was Enlil, and Enlil's people were the Jews, then you don't attack a god directly; you attack his people.
How long have these Anunnaki wars been going on for?
Well, that's hard to trace. I've been trying to find out exactly when it really got into full bloom, but it's going on for a long time. It's the longest hatred war that there is on the planet, and it's caused much of our problems that we have today. Look at what's going on in the state of Iran. I mean, they are absolutely dedicated to the destruction of Israel and Judaism. It's their credo, and that is being fostered by, I believe, this Anunnaki influence through Marduk. And I can trace another example of the war against Jews. If you go back to the Nuremberg trials, where Admiral Doughnuts was bragging about this Shangri-La he had with his submarines found in the Antarctic. Have we discussed that?
We talked about Admiral Byrd in the Antarctic.
Okay. Now, if the force that was attacking Admiral Byrd was an Anunnaki rather than a Nazi force, and if the Nazis had connections with the Anunnaki in the Antarctic, if it was Marduk, perhaps the technology that they were getting to fight their war, the advancement that they had beyond what we knew about, the rockets and jet planes and all manner of things, maybe was transferred by Marduk to them to help in achieving the Holocaust. And that's a stretch, I know. make people wonder about that. But to me, I just feel that there is a connection there, and I'd like other people to look into it and see if we can develop something on it.
So what would be the connection to Nazis? Or is there one?
Well, okay, Hitler, Admiral Doughnuts, was his chief naval operator, claimed he had this connection in Shangri-La, which was an Antarctic sub-base in which he said there was advanced technology. And the story of Operation High Jump, Admiral Byrd's expedition to the Antarctic, said they were attacked by flying saucers. And that technology is attributed to the UFO field and the Anunnakis. And if that technology was what turned Admiral Byrd around, and if the Nazis were connected down there, they were getting help, technical transfer of technology in their war against the Jews. I know that's a big leap, Russell, but it's something that just keeps rolling around in my head, and I had to bring it out, and I thought we could discuss it and then maybe tear it apart, and maybe destroy it. You know, I'm open to criticism on it, because I feel that if Enlil was indeed the God Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, it's very possible that Marduk was the god of Muhammad.
Now, of course, what you're saying is incredibly sacrilegious, right?
Absolutely. It's not meant to be. It's just I have a curious mind. In fact, the last year I've written a book called The Adventures of a Curious Mind. It's kind of my memo about my life, and I find that the thing that goes on is questions and answers. It seems to keep the curious mind I have always is asking me, why is this and how does it work? What's going on here? And these are the questions that I've been dealing with. You asked me, what's happened in the last year, and my research has been focused around those two items.
And yet you didn't have to do anything. You could have just sat on the research you'd already done. Yeah. No, I don't think this has any connection with my 4 books that I wrote. In other words, in the background of the 4 books, I was constantly in conversations with Zecharia about this and about that, and the subject came up a couple of times about who was the God of the Hebrews, and when we came to realize that we had both come to this similar conclusion, it opened a new Pandora's box for me. They wrote the I think, it's my opinion that the Anunnaki wrote Gilgamesh, the story of the Epic of Gilgamesh, and its reason was to give us the story of the flood and the background history on it. And if that was the purpose of that, and also they wrote Enuma Elish, there are many things that we get from the cuneiform tablets that deal with the history of our planet, our solar system, and also our people. And so the history of the religions is worth investigating. Where did the religion come from? Where did all the stories come from? Was there a guy called Moses? Did the Hebrews really exodus from Egypt under the story that we have in the Bible? You examine the Torah, for instance, Russell. It's the 5 books of Moses, and the story is that he spent 40 days and 40 nights on a mountaintop, and he got this story from God, Hebrew God. Well, if that Hebrew God was Enlil, he could have given them this story to found the religion that he wanted people to follow him only. He formed my chosen people. Do the Anunnaki themselves have a religion?
Yes, they did. That's a very good question, Russell. And they had a deity, and the deity they called the creator of all. And I think the reason for that is I told you once about my inquiry with Linus Pauling about if he believes in God. Did we talk about that?
Yes, but we can do it again.
What I'm saying is that every advanced civilization eventually faces up to the question, is there a God and where'd the universe come from? And there really doesn't even today seem to be an answer to that. So when I asked Linus Pauling, who's my chemistry professor at CALTECH, I said, Dr. Pauling, do you believe in God? He said, Klarfeld, I believe our discipline is to explain everything that's gone on in the universe back to the beginning, the Big Bang. If you were to ask me what there was a millisecond before the Big Bang, we can't tell you. We don't know. If you want to believe in a God as the creator, please do, because we don't have that answer. So I don't think the Anunnaki had that answer either, even as advanced the civilization as they appear to have been. And therefore, they had a deity called the creator of all, which explained to them where everything came from, where they came from, who created them.
Were they made in the image of their creator?
That's a good question, Russell. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that. It's very possible. That's a good question.
Well, where did this conclusion come from that the Anunnaki are reptilian?
I don't believe that. I mean, there are people who bring forward that theory, and I think it maybe came from some of the images that were carved in stone on different parts of the Sumerian architecture that showed reptilian dogs and showed other bird heads, things like that. But I think those were symbolic. I don't think those represented what the Anunnaki really were. I think the images we have of these very strong, powerful, physical specimens holding different objects in their hands and so forth were really what the Anunnaki look like. I don't believe that they were reptilian at all.
They were human.
We're like them. You know, we were created in their image, and people ask me, do they look like us? I said, no, we look like them.
Let me ask you something, Marshall. How long have you been researching the Anunnaki and Zecharia Sitchin?
20 some odd years.
And in that time, have you believed something and then through some new information or research of your own or epiphany found that you've come to a new conclusion?
Well, to be honest with you, Russell, all of my life I've wondered where we came from and was there a God? When I found Sitchin, I read the 12th Planet and I said, gee, this is a lot of stuff that would really answer what I've been looking for. Why don't I disprove it? So I started writing my first book called Adam the Missing Link in an attempt to disprove Sitchin and ended up proving him. I mean, that's what happened. I found the core of what I believe he revealed to us. I don't think that story has exceptions to it. It may have, but I have not veered off of that path since I wrote the first book. And the more I researched, the more it reinforced what I believe was truly possible. And I'm kind of a tire kicker. As an engineer, I like to take things apart and look at them from all different angles. And some of the stuff I do is outside the box. And Sitchin never went outside the box. He stayed within the confines of his discipline, his research. And I challenged him several times with the ideas that did come to me. Like I said, the story that you've revealed is that Anunnaki were here for some 200,000 years before humans appeared, before we were created. And they were mining gold all that time. And I said, you know, the initial purpose that was stated was to close the ozone leak in their atmosphere. And he said, yeah. And I said, well, that took not a lot of gold. What did they do with the rest of it? Were they ingesting it? He said, what? I said, you know, there are people out there today, Zecharia, that say that if you ingest non-atomic gold, wonderful things happen to you. He said, no, no, no. He says, I won't buy that. So here was Klarfeld, you know, challenging the professor on a crazy idea he had that was outside the box. Now, the other thing I challenged him on was, since the victors always write the story the way they want it to be told, were some of the stories that you're translating spin? Were they trying to spin us? And he says, well, what do you mean by that? I said, for instance, the mutiny story of the gold mines, so the fact that the reason it was given for the creation of primitive workers was that there was a mutiny in their gold mine. He said, yeah, that's what it says. And I said, well, they wrote that. Do you think that that's the truth, or were they just making up a story to cover that they wanted slaves? No. So we went on back and forth like that, Russell, and I was the petulant student who went beyond the box.
What motivates the Anunnaki?
That's a good question, Russell. And I think that the story of the flood might give us some insight into the answer to that. As the story goes, Enlil, the commander, wanted the flood to exterminate humanity. He was fed up with us. He said we were too noisy, we were diluting his bloodline, and this was an opportunity to start over again, just blood one. But Enki, who was more involved in the process of creating us, found a way through messages he got from his creator of all of how to save us and not break his oath to his commander. Well, that's an interesting story. It was told to us in the Epic of Gilgamesh, let's see, tablet number 11, and it gave an insight into what was not in the biblical story of Noah. So that story got cleaned up when it hit the Bible. So here we see one of the leaders wanting us to be destroyed, and the other one sort of saving us. So the motivation could be that we are their offspring. We are, in retrospect, their prodigy. And if they saved us once, they might be interested in saving us again if we're about to destroy ourselves. That's a very positive thought.
We have a question here from the audience. How did the Anunnaki know that the Earth had gold?
Well, they're very advanced, and they had an atomic table just like we do. They knew what all the elements were, and they somehow they did a survey of all the planets in our solar system, and discovered that uniquely Earth was blessed with gold. That's as far as I can determine.
Well, something I'm curious about, did the Anunnaki energize themselves from the suffering of others?
There are things that we have to speculate on. We cannot give answers to, Russell, because it's not able to, figure things out. This thing I did with the washboard gold mining just happened to fit together. I took the pieces of it and I said, well, okay, the flood buried their deep shaft mines in Southeast Africa, and they couldn't go digging around in there, didn't want to or whatever, and the water exposed other sources of gold. And they saw that there were rivers around the planet, like the Nile River. Every spring flood is filled with placer gold from the Nubian minefields. It's like the Mekong River floods every 6 months and was filled with gold, placer gold. And there's a river in Peru called the Urubamba goes around Machu Picchu filled with placer gold during the spring runoff. Nature is doing the work for them. All they had to do is figure out how to separate the gold out of the water. And since gold is 19 times heavier than water, if you bounce it like on a washboard, it'll precipitate out. So what I see from many, many of these iconic structures, they're washboards. They're step pyramids, a washboard, the internal upside-down cobalt ceiling of the Great Pyramids, a washboard. Machu Picchu is just a series of washboards. So I put two and two together, and I said, okay, all I do is get the water up there and bang it out. But then I thought, how do you collect the gold? I mean, it's good to bang it out, but it's just tedious to try to pick it up. And I discovered the story of Jason and the golden fleece, that you can put a sheepskin in placer water and it'll fill up with gold. Bingo! I put them all together, and that's what I've come up with. And I think it's a valid assumption that somebody, I hope one day, will prove me to be correct on that discovery.
Did you ever share that theory with Zecharia Sitchin?
No. He had passed on by the time I came to it.
Would he have disagreed?
No, I think he would have agreed with me, because I think in some of his writings he saw these rivers coming through places like there's a bunch of step pyramids that have underground river running through it, and they were able to siphon the water in the tunnels and create pressures. And it was one of the first places that I examined. Then I went over to Angkor Wat. I discovered that Angkor Wat was part of a multiple complex of step pyramids that were in a very high placer water area. And I put it all together. I said, that's what was going on. These beautiful stone monuments were put together in places where there were river water which had placer gold in it.
Are the Anunnaki coming back, or did they ever leave?
Good question, Russell. Hard to answer. I would say that it's possible that they haven't left, or that Marduk hasn't left, because I believe the mothership phased off with the majority of the Anunnaki with it, but Marduk was kind of hung out, and it's been reported in several instances, whether you believe them or not, to still be hanging out here causing mischief. But the mothership doesn't necessarily have to be too far away. It's possible that it's orbiting today around one of the nearby planets, like maybe Mercury. And if they decide they want to come back, it's not that difficult for them to do that. People sometimes think they have to wait until the home planet Nibiru comes back through our solar system for them to reappear. But that's I don't think the answer. I think the answer is that they're maybe observing us from afar. We have all of these UFO observations of strange things happening, UFOs flying over our missile bases and deactivating them. Things like that would lead me to believe that the presence has not totally gone away.
If the Anunnaki return, will there be a war for the possession of this planet?
Well, I asked Sitchin that question, Russell, and he said it depends on who's in charge. You see, there's still those two factions. If Enki and his dominance is the one who comes back, I think they'll be benevolent and not aggressive at all. If some of the Enlil sons are in charge, it might be a different story. But since it hasn't happened that way, I tend to believe that they bear us no harm.
And we would find a way to coexist with the Anunnaki.
Oh yeah, we did before. See, that's the beautiful part about the Epic of Gilgamesh, is it is a story of when we existed side by side with them. It's Uruk, 4,600 years ago. Ishtar's there, Enlil's there, Enki's there. Gilgamesh is the misfit king who's rumbling around, causing problems, and then the whole story is of the coexistence. We were subservient to them. They were our lords at that time. They called themselves lords. And the people, when they got upset with their king, they went to the Anunnaki and said, hey, help us get rid of this guy. That's kind of interesting part of that story. My book that Mary and I wrote, called Gilgamesh 10, is a screenplay that tells the story in a movie fashion. It's a book, but it reads like a screenplay. And it's our interpretation of what it would have been like 4,600 years ago to be there, living in that coexistence with the Anunnaki.
Another audience question. If the Anunnaki were helping Hitler, why didn't the Nazis win?
Yeah, good question. I don't know the answer to that, but it appears to me that they were so technologically advanced to the rest of the world. How did they get all that technology? I mean, we had to go get their rocket engineers to create our space agency. They had all advanced technology. Why they didn't win is a good question. I don't know. But they certainly had the advanced tool. They could have won.
If the Anunnaki returned, do you think they'd like to meet Donald Trump? Do you think they'd get along with him?
I think they'd like him.
Well, they'd like his taste in gold, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Well, you know, they were supposedly these tall, blue-eyed blondes.
Yeah, he'd like tall, blue-eyed blondes, that's for sure.
You know, the good question that you have your audience ask themselves is, you take towns like Cusco, and there were these places were just filled with gold. Where did it come from? You know, they weren't mining it. It was not a thing that was important to the Incas for them to go mine the gold. But there, nearby, there were washboard gold mining properties where I think the gold came from. And in every case, you say, well, you know, Montezuma and the Aztec, they had all this gold. Well, they were told by their god, Quetzalcoatl, that the gold belonged to the gods. They could use it to make art and so forth, but when the gods came back, you had to give it to us because it belonged to the gods. And they had tons and tons of gold, and when the conquistadors showed up, they said, okay, it's yours, you can have it. But the conquistadors were greedy, and they wanted more than what they were able to give them. It's a horrible story. But in the history of gold, you can't eat it. You can't make any workable tools out of it. It's too soft. It's pretty to look at, and it's hard to, you know, get rid of it. Just you can sit there and admire it, but and it wouldn't be mining gold to eat it.
Question from the audience. Nibiru comes into our galaxy every 3,600 years. And when it does, it doesn't come close to Earth. It comes close to Mars, actually.
It goes between Jupiter and Mars, yeah.
There you go. This is all written in the Sumerian tablets, which were written 4,000 years before the Bible. I don't know if that's true. This is what the audience member is saying.
Yes, that is. Well, that's what's written by, translated by Sitchin.
So it doesn't crash into the Earth. It doesn't pass by and destroy the planet.
No, but what does happen is it's such a large gravitational body that its influence is magnified. Like if the moon, which is a fraction of the size of Nibiru, influences our tidal action, you can imagine what would happen to our tidal action if this thing comes close by. Also, it causes volcanic eruptions. And in fact, the Greeks named it Nemesis. They observed that it came through during their history, and they called it Nemesis because of the things that happened on planet Earth as a result of its passing. Gravitational impact is terrific.
Well, you're almost 88 years old. No offense, but you're coming to the end. What has been your greatest revelation?
That's a good question. As I look back on it, I think my discovery of the washboard gold mining theory, which answered the question of what was going on inside the Great Pyramid. Many people have tackled that puzzle and come up with all kinds of theories, but I think my Great Pyramid washboard gold mining theory, which I, by the way, have on my YouTube page as a YouTube, is a discovery that is got merit to it. You ask yourself when you're building this Great Pyramid, why do you do all the stuff you did inside of it and make it all watertight? It had to be watertight for a reason. And then the smoking gun is the damaged stone box that's found inside the king's chamber. All the outer edges of that box have been damaged after it was put in there. And my solution was that as the water churned up and bounced back and forth up through the grand gallery, finally got to the king's chamber, it floated this pristine box and banged it around on the ceiling and the walls inside the chamber, damaging its every outside edge. It's very visible. If you look closely at it, you'll see there's a huge amount of pounding that went on. And finally, one corner of the box was pounded down to the point where water got in it, and it sunk. And if that happened, that was the end of the washboard gold mining in the Great Pyramid. It's a very, I think, substantial theory that I've launched, and it's part of my total washboard gold mining contribution by the Anunnaki.
Will humanity ever be free of the Anunnaki, or will we always be linked?
My answer to that is we're always linked to them. They're like family.
So this is a shared planet?
Yes.
It's not ours?
No. It was given to us, supposedly, to take care of as part of the destiny. The destiny that the Anunnaki wrote about was that they were destined to come to this planet to create humanity and then turn it over to us, and it was our destiny to take care of it. We haven't done a very good job.
Well, I guess that's another good question then. Where do you see the planet 50 years from now, Marshall?
I don't know. That's a good question. I go one day at a time. I'm worried about where we're going tomorrow, if we're going to get 50 years out of it.
Are you not optimistic about the future?
Yeah, I am. I think that if we get ourselves into the worst situation, that they will show up and rescue us, prevent us from destroying the planet and ourselves. I think it's in their best interest to see that happen. And they've got the capability, I believe, of doing that. So I don't think that there's a negativity involved. I'm very positive about our survival with their help.
Fascinating interview as always, Marshall. Tell us more about your books and where the audience can best purchase them. Okay.
The best place to get them is on my webpage, which is atomthemissinglink.com. They're also available at Amazon and Kindle, but I have them at the prices that are reduced from what those folks charge. So if you go to the second page of my website, atomthemissinglink.com, you'll find the 4 books there: Atom, the Missing Link, Gilgamesh 10, The Anunnaki Were Here, and The Mysteries of Ancient Technology.
Brilliant stuff. Marshall Klarfeld, thank you so much once again for being a guest on my program.
You're quite welcome, Russell, and have a good night.